educational system.
Hello. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. Oh my goodness. I guess just to start things off, I wanted to introduce myself. I had to look at my notes. I'm Elaine, and I've been here in Shanghai on and off for the last 13 years now, so I'm kind of, I guess, an expat, what an expat would call an old China hand, but, you know. I am currently brand strategy director of this channel called ElaineisXYZ. We're a platform that showcases Chinese creativity to the rest of the world. But I've also had stints in advertising and journalism and emceeing. I'm a little rusty right now. But, and I guess if you guys have ever read a website called Shanghaiist, I actually was the managing editor of that when I was in my early 20s. I definitely could have used the expertise of the panel back then, I think. Yeah, so I figure I would start by just saying what this event is even about and who this event is for. I admin a channel called Women Helping Women on WeChat that has been around here for, I believe, almost 5 years now. And true to the channel's name, the main goal of that channel is literally just women helping women. It was created basically to kind of be this space where women can promote things that they're doing, other women can find out, maybe ask questions about things like, oh, you know, what's WeChat marketing, or where can I get my nails done for cheaper? Anything. Like, I've let it be kind of freewheeling because I think it's just kind of nice to have a community here in China of people who are just enthusiastically helping each other out. And the whole reason it was created was because we felt like there were all of these kind of boys clubs where guys were just helping each other out, but they didn't quite help out women. So we created our own space. But people, there's been a bunch of people here who have actually been there for the full 5 years, and they would know that I'm not actually the person who founded this group, though. Our founder was a wonderful and lovely woman called Sandy Wu, who very unfortunately passed away in December of 2019, shortly after moving back to the United States. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this event on this topic actually was because the last conversation I had with Sandy was about our careers. She was about to leave Shanghai because, well, I think she was just so pissed off that she had found out how much her work had been underpaying her. And we were talking about like whether or not the experience would be applicable to anything in the States, like things that she felt like she could have done, and maybe like, well, you know, it's really hard to figure these things out in the moment. You know, I hope you'll be back to try again in the future. And unfortunately, that was the last conversation that I had with her. And I think this year, when I was actually helping another group plan a whole bunch of like Women's History Month events, it's Women's History Month in the United States right now. I don't know if it is in any other country, but International Women's Day was, you know, near the beginning of this month. I came across this topic of equal pay. And so today, the reason why some of us are wearing red, probably more red than you normally see in like various groups, is because it's in the United States Equal Pay Day, March 24th. And what that denotes is that this is the day that women, on average, in the United States, working women, earn the same amount as men did in 2020. So, because women, on average, working women, are paid about 83 cents to the dollar of men in the United States. Here in China, actually, the date is a little further out. It's actually sometime in April. But as we'll go into a little bit, that's not as dour as it sounds, at least not for us here in Shanghai. But basically, no matter what around the world, even if you're in some place that's supposed to be incredibly equitable, like Iceland, women still have not managed to get to pay equity. And so what I wanted to center this panel on was just like why that is, what are the systemic issues that lead to it, and what everyone can kind of start thinking about what to do about it. You know, not just individuals, but also corporations and communities to create a more equitable society for women, especially when it comes to something that's as important as their pay. And so I'm incredibly excited to introduce you to the people who are sitting right next to me, because they're just like so talented and such a wealth of expertise here, and I'm like shocked that I managed to convince them to come. So thank you very much, everybody, because this is actually the first time I'm meeting all of you in person as well. So I guess also thank my friends who introduced me to you guys. To my very left is He Yuan. She's a Global Perspectives on Society teaching fellow at NYU Shanghai, with a PhD and MPhil from the Center of Development Studies at the University of Cambridge. And her research is in China and India's development models in regards to human development and meritocracy. Right next to her is Grace Sun, who has had years of consulting experience in strategy, finance, and HR, helping to smooth business transformations for multinationals. She is currently leading the Greater China Consumer Strategy for Nike, and after helping them lead strategic change management in organizational effectiveness for the region. I should have chosen less words to say your bio with. But it's very impressive. So next to her is Kuko Ayama, who is the president and CEO of Learning Leaders, which offers people debate and public speaking programs in order to empower them to become stronger leaders and communicate for change. And then finally, rounding off our panel is Jenny Lee. She has had 15 years of professional experience in executive recruitment, talent consulting, and knowledge assets management for multinational companies and domestic companies as well. And she currently works for the global recruiting firm Hayes. And so as you can see, we have academics, we have people who help with individual development, and we also have people who work in corporate to talk to us today about this issue. So welcome everybody, if we can give a round of applause to them. Thank you for joining us this Wednesday. And so I'm just going to start out with the first question to let you know the panelists a little more, and that is, in your own words, how do you feel your career so far has touched upon this idea of equality at work for women? And I guess we'll just pass it down where it's... I hope so. Yeah, does that work?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm probably the one with the least working experience here. So I'm still a postdoc after completing my PhD, and because this is a kind of career trajectory where you spend a lot of time preparing for it, and you started very late. So for me personally, I haven't experienced so much in terms of gender inequality, in terms of payment in my career yet. But I know that in academia, if you look at universities all over the world, the majority of professors are male. And if we think about the history of educational system, like the university where I graduated from, Cambridge, it has a history of over 800 years, but the history of women's education is no more than 200 years. So that will have a systematic impact on how academia itself is organized and the women's position in the whole system. So that is from the academic part. And in the meantime, when I studied meritocracy, I also did some research related to the oil recruitment in the oil sector in China. So it is again a highly unequal industry for women. So that is my personal experience related to it.
All right, so I feel I'm quite lucky to born in Shanghai, where it's the tier 1 city. It's very metropolitan, tick. And then in an area where women's probably power is even more stronger than men. If you know the locals, they will tell you a story about you in their household, how their moms lead the family. So sometimes I feel lucky. So when I was growing up, I never encountered any gender inequality. But after a while, moving to HR consulting, I do consult with a lot of company on D&I issue and lead the best employer study for Greater China. You see a lot of company doing, for example, like how much percentage of middle management or even senior management they need to be female, and they have programs to support maternity leave, baby or healthcare for motherhood. So a lot of policy that is related to the taking care of a woman and support their career. So in summary, this is how my experience with the topic.
So I just want to start off by saying that it was really interesting when we first showed up and we're talking about this topic, that I think none of us has cracked the code of this topic, and that's why it's so fascinating. And so just to start off on a personal level, the reason why this is a passion of mine is because I used to work in finance, where I was one of the few female salespeople, and I saw a lot of mistreatment, especially in countries like Japan, where the way that you're treated is just generally very different. So that was on a personal level. But in a professional level, I've been in charge of diversity and inclusion in our company. But I think the moment that I realized this is an important topic was when one of our junior team members came to my desk and put this stack of paper and was like, "These are all the studies that you need to read because we need to change the way that we develop our female team members." And I think that was actually one of the moments where it was incredibly eye-opening, because I was still early on in my career, but to have someone to come out and say, "Hey, this is what we got to do," was really an eye-opening experience for me. So that's just something I wanted to share on a personal level.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I was studying in girls' school for 7 years, during which I was trained to be an independent and capable woman, because our school motto is, I still remember, IACE, I for independence, A for ability, C for caring, and E for elegance. But by contrast, I was actually brought up in a family where my mother is a full-time housewife. So ever since I was like a teenager, so I witnessed her being treated somehow unfairly, as she got relatively low speaking power because of her relatively low financial status in my family. So that reinforced me to be an independent working mother when I gave birth to a baby in the beginning of the year 2020. But surprisingly, actually, I got promoted right before my maternity leave at my current company. I think not it's because my company wants to recognize my performance, as I was the China top biller by that time, but actually they want to retain me and want me to be back to work after my mat leave. So yeah, I think I really appreciate that, because I can spend more time with my family and the newly born baby. And then currently I'm entitled with like a flexible working hour and also some optional working from home, so which I really appreciate. And I think it's our company's culture of being people caring and inclusive that made me working with the company for almost 10 years. Yeah, so that's my sharing.
Thank you.
Let me make sure this mic works. Yeah. Hello?
Hello? Okay. Yeah, well, we'll pass around this mic hopefully then, and hope that it's better. All right then, so so the first question that I have, and Fukuko touched upon this, is that this is a systemic issue that nobody has solved yet, right? And so when we're discussing this, obviously, I would not say that I am promising the answers from this panel. This panel is unfortunately actually, I'm not going to say the word unfortunately. The panel is going to give you food for thought and ways to hopefully think about this more and talk about it more amongst yourselves, because I think one of the ways that this is going to change is people being more aware of all of the moving parts that are required for equity in the end. And so I think I'm going to start with Fukuko, actually, because Why do you think this is such a tough nut to crack? As somebody who has worked not just in China but also abroad.
So I had the chance to think about this a little bit more deeply since our last call a few nights ago. And so just to share a little bit of context of our mission within our company. So our goal is to equip students with the skills necessary to communicate and to feel that they're heard, respected, and understood, right? And debate and public speaking is really just a tool to be able to do that. And so as a company, you know, it's really important for us to make sure that we're leading by example. And I think that the reason why it's so hard to figure out the reason why we can't solve this is because generally people I've noticed are at kind of different stages of understanding when we talk about diversity and inclusion. So, you know, in the States we talk about, you use this word woke, right? So people are woke if you know a lot about social justice and racial inequality and whatnot. But through the years of work, I realized that you can never be fully woke because it's an issue that you have to keep learning about. And you know, when I was looking into the issue of diversity and inclusion and how do I get buy-in from the rest of the team, it was really hard because I would say, well, that person doesn't know anything about it, that person knows a lot about it and cares about it, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And what's interesting is there's actually 6 stages of understanding when you talk about diversity and inclusion. And the first is unaware. Second is apathetic, so indifference, right? You've heard about it, you've read about it, but you don't really care. The third stage is curiosity. Fourth is informed. Fifth is empowered. And then finally, you're an advocate. And so one thing that I realized, I think as an individual, someone pushing for change within the company, was that I just needed to be aware that everyone is at different stages. And I think the challenge is that where within an organization, you have to convince so many people within the company, and I think that's the biggest challenge. And there's a lot of amazing academics here too, so I think they can share more about the data and whatnot too.
Yeah, absolutely. Hyun, if you don't mind just talking a little bit about what your studies have possibly framed in this specific question of, institutional issues that might affect why this is such a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, I think, I think very often when we think about equal pay, most of the time people can draw some conclusions from personal experience, and I think that is valid. But one of the problems that I see in terms of this is I know that the kind of lean-in style feminism is very popular among entrepreneurs and especially business circles. So that kind of individualistic approach asks women to take a step forward wherever you can. And I think that is important because it's also related to the motivation. Sometimes you are actually more capable than you think you are, and especially in a world where men always take a very competitive attitudes towards many different things. Women tend to be frightened away from the competition that is probably necessary for them to gain access to the resources or the credit or the opportunities that they do deserve. But I think the problem with that kind of feminism from an academic perspective is that it ignores the institutional problem behind those approaches. For example, if you work in a company and you get promoted, you would think that, oh, I earn more money and I can hire a helper, domestic helper, to help with my cleaning or my household chores, but actually it is just transfer some of the gender jobs that's typically assigned to women from you to another woman. It doesn't actually change the structure that this caring, this cleaning, cooking are still regarded as a kind of women's job, right? So it also creates kind of division between women themselves. So we can see that in certain countries, especially in China here, growing inequality is a really big problem, not only between urban and rural, but between women in different levels as well. And I hope that we can be aware of that when we think about that kind of individualistic approach. It is necessary. I'm not saying it's totally wrong, but I think that is just not enough to change the situation overall for all women.
Yeah, and actually you had been talking a little bit when we had previously talked about the entire panel in general about, for instance, something like the Wuhan, the COVID pandemic, how, for instance, the gender plays out there, because it's not so much that maybe women doctors don't get paid the same as male doctors, it's just that,
I think sometimes when you look at the data, take the data at the base value. For example, if you go to a company and say, let's evaluate whether this company is achieving equal pay for everybody. So you pull out all the pay slips for men and women. So for the manager's position, as long as the salary is not negotiated individually, usually if it's like level by level, you will find that men or women on this level are paid equally. So if you easily come to a conclusion that yes, we have achieved the gender equality in this company, that's probably too hasty, because the fact is that these gender roles these career paths are highly gendered. For example, if you look at the pandemic, right? According to statistics, 2/3 of the women, 2/3 of the people who actually contributed to the pandemic preventions are women, and many of them are frontline workers or community members, volunteers, even nurses. But if you look at the dramas that has been shown, it's always the doctors, right? Represented as men who are main contributors, and that it has a great influence on the pay scale as well, because usually you would find that it's much easier for men to achieve higher position in an institution, while women, in terms of absolute number, they might be the majority in an industry, but they are always kept at the bottom.
Yeah, and oh my goodness. Since
here, I can just yell, I can project, it's okay.
Yeah, but since we're on the subject of China already, actually, I wanted to talk a little bit to Grace, because she's had so much of experience here in diversity initiatives here in China. So maybe talk about that a little more, because when we talked in our conversation, you also brought up a lot of these data points that your companies had done in terms of research of pay equity.
Yeah, so I used to work in Aon Hewitt, which is a big four HR consulting firm worldwide, and we have a group of people specifically focused on compensation survey. The compensation survey cover a wide range of industry, from like real estate, manufacturing, healthcare to retail. And we kind of survey thousands of companies in China, ranging from multinational company, private owned, to state-owned company. And every year we do a lot of analysis on which company pays more, 70% percentile of the pay range at the same band level. And we constantly, because diversity, inclusion, and gender equality is such a hot topic, and we're always trying to dig out, is there any pay gaps between female and male? And to our surprise, there's actually not that huge gap. Even I interviewed several HR VP in big multinational company. They also trying to dig out some of the gaps in their salary, trying to enhance their diversity inclusion initiative. But the surprising thing is they didn't find much of a gap between female and male. And back to, I think one of the reasons it probably will draw that is one of the He Yuan says about, because a segment of a career path, because certain career or certain career developments, for example, like nurses, it's easy for the girls to apply, and the pay level is lower than doctor, because majority of that proportion of a career is female. This could draw some of the differences in the analysis. And the other thing is when we do the survey, a lot of company, a big company, we didn't really touch upon private-owned company. And I read some of the surveys or articles online saying in China, most of the pay gaps that is huge for female and male majority is private-owned company in the regional level. And And the third point is some of the rural area in China where male is still presumed to be predominant in the family. When their household usually have like 3 or 4 kids, they will usually send a male to the school rather, the female are left out, either uneducated or they tend to progress into a low tier of the career path. So this also drives some of the data points which when we do the research it didn't show up, but there's still some of the problems, especially in the low tier city in Greater China. How do we it maybe change into a more institutional approach? How do we look at the things more holistically? Not by each company provide the pay level, but talking about the education system and the mindset change in the whole society.
Yeah, I mean, if you can pass it to Jenny actually, because I feel like as somebody who works for a global recruiting firm, like, hey, Jenny might have like something to offer in terms of what she's seen specifically here in China and trends.
Yeah, Grace just mentioned private-owned companies, so I'll address to that. But I think in general, it's still a male-dominant industry, especially I think for global-wise, because we can see all the executives are like mainly male. Interestingly, we find that in Western, women are usually more independent. They live separately from their parents, so they may find it difficult to balance their work and life. But here in China, we found that many independent working mother, they are being successful partly because they are under the help from their family, and like many of them they live with their parents or parents-in-law, so those people can take care of their kids. So that's the one thing I would like to say. And talking about the talent market in China, I think compared to multinational companies, domestic or local private-owned companies, they prefer to hire male candidates. Even I think for supporting functions, because usually for supporting functions, women should be mainly working on that, but for private-owned companies, it's different. I think echoing just the Fukuko-san and He-Yuan about their reason to dig out why. One is because of people's assumption. Many of them might feel that if that job requires very frequent travel or like a heavy workload or entrepreneurship, maybe male can bear it or be qualified for that. And also because the females, they are of disadvantage, as they are very likely to give in career aspire and focus on their family when they meet the difficulties. So local companies prefer to hire male candidates. And the other is from the cultural perspective and kind of prejudice, because generally in people's mindset, they might have the impression that a successful female leader might appear to be a single tough lady, but like a successful male candidate, they may look like the ideal of success. They are more welcome in the workplace. So that's why also for the private-owned companies, they prefer to hire male executive level candidates. And hence, interestingly, for those private-owned companies, they usually will raise their gender preference request directly to headhunters. Okay, but whereas I think for multinational companies, actually they also hold kind of the gender discrimination towards, to some extent, but they are relatively low-key to instruct us. And more subtle, and also a bit differently. Actually, they hold more bias towards the aged woman. That's very interesting because if a man is reaching the age of 50, they may think that man is still energetic, experienced, and mature enough to handle that position. But if a woman is of like 50 years old, they may think, she might be lacking in passion, energy, because she's waiting to retire very soon. Okay, and because of the China labor policy, the woman retire at the age of 55 and men of 60. Yeah.
Changing, right?
Yeah, to be changed, I think so, to reach that gender equality. Wow. So I think overall nowadays we see a more female-friendly industry. Employers are being transparent. They would value the people's results. So as long as women can prove yourself and give your value to the company, I think either you could be hired or retained, no matter you are single or you are a working mother. That's it.
Yeah, and so in that vein though, I think, it's okay, I can just yell. I think we're a small enough room, right? Everyone can hear me. Yeah, I think in that vein though, because you have all of these companies kind of with this bias, obviously like I think everyone here works at a slightly better company that maybe has not like specifically been telling people like, hey, only hire males. But maybe even pulling from that experience, why should companies care about this? How do we convince companies to care about this? And what do companies who actually do care about this look like, in a way? And I guess, why don't I pass the mic to Grace first, perhaps?
All right. I think in order to solve this, a company needs to break the silo of only looking at the candidate on a male or female lens, but more on the competency lens. It's about everybody is equal, no matter you're black, you're Asian, you're male, you're female, but whoever group capabilities show that he or she can do the job best, they can be hired or they can be promoted. It's really break down the bias of gender and races. That's really fundamental. And the other way around is through the education system is how, because we can do a lot to say, you know, we need to have certain level of female leaders, met some targets. It's easy said than done, but how do you change the whole management mindset? How do you change the whole employee mindset? And even, you know, when you grow up, you're educated to be, girls need to be like accountant, more safe, taking care of family. How do we break down those silos and treat everyone on a capability basis, do your passion, chasing the job that you love instead of what everyone perceives you need to do. Maybe it's broader topic, even more than just gender equality. It's also about like power and money is the thing that you want, or other people want. It's rather than what you want, what you like to do, no matter who you are, male or female.
Yeah. And I think a part of this is also like looking at the start at different candidates than you would possibly normally consider, right? I think for Pupo, you might have had something to add to that. Yeah.
Just to jump off of what Grace has shared, I definitely think that companies should focus on competency, but I think there's multiple layers beyond that puts certain identities behind from the very beginning, right? In terms of education, like you said. And also, when you are evaluating competency, women tend to be less likely to negotiate for their salaries, and they're less likely to have support systems within their communities that will push them to negotiate, right? One thing we were talking about earlier is things like personal finance. I hate talking about money, and I used to work in finance. Like, what's wrong with me, right? And it's like, but it's also when women feel like you're not capable enough to apply for a certain job. So one thing that we talk about a lot is how do you frame the job description so that it's more appealing to certain less like minorities within an organization or less represented communities, right? If you were to say competitive position or you have to be assertive, then men, if they have 40% of the qualifications, they'll be like, awesome, I'm the best candidate ever. And you know, women here are probably like, but I'm kind of good at Chinese, like, and you're like HSK6, right? Like, and, you know, and that in itself, I think is there's so many layers to it, and that makes it so much harder. So coming back to what you mentioned about what companies can do is, I think, to really take a look at where is the gap and how can you equip both young adults and women in your company with those skills beyond just marketing or whatnot, you know, supporting them to go to these networking events, to talk to other women about these issues. And so I think I just rambled on, but the idea is this is a never-ending topic.
Yeah, and Jenny, actually, you have shared that Hayes had specifically been working on this problem as well, right? So what's behind that?
Okay, so actually Hayes recently launched an Hayes Asia D&I report focusing on diversity and inclusion. And in that survey, actually it shows that gender diversity could have positive impact on company culture, innovation, and talent retention. So actually, in case China, actually we have the highest percentage of female leaders, but we are still trying our best to increase that percentage as we are not yet 50-50. I think we started from like 28% and now we are reaching 35%. So each year, to show our show our support for the International Women's Day, we have a few initiatives, both Asia-wide and locally, to celebrate the social, economical, cultural, and political achievements of women. And this year's theme of ours is Choose to Challenge, because choosing to challenge is to challenge the gender equality in our everyday life that could take us one step closer to building a gender equal workplace. This is important to us because we influence hundreds and thousands of business every day firsthand, every single day in our life. And actually, pace also changed a lot during the past several years. I can share with you an example. One of our manager in Guangzhou office, actually she got rejected by Hayes 4 years ago. After her mat leave, because by that time the director thinks, well, you are a new mother, so you can't really handle the heavy workload and the pressure. But interestingly, like 1 year ago, she got offered by Hayes, by another new director after her delivering to her second baby. And up to now, she proved herself to be a successful leader. So this actually tells us that a company should always focus on what you can do, not what your current status is. Yeah. And apart from that, I think a company should also do the following thing, like first to implement the equality strategy from the top down. Because they should have a leadership team. We always think that like a diverse manager grow a diverse team. And secondly, I think besides, we should have the clear initiative and development plans in place to retain and promote our top female leaders or talents. For example, we can arrange like a women leadership forum to unleash those women's potential in the workplace, like the forum we are doing now. I also think it's a very amazing one. And of course, I think we should also foster a culture of inclusion. Hayes actually have a very interesting practice I can also share with you if you are any of the employers. On International Women's Day, in order to thank our female employees for their hard work, we will buy breakfast in the morning and deliver to the office, and then we will have all the male leaders get dressed up and held bunches of flowers and greet all our female employees alongside the entry store, give them hugs, and deliver the breakfast, which make them feel very warm-hearted. So this is something really interesting. And also to offer more flexibility, as I just mentioned, working from home, flexible working hours. Actually, I arrive late each day in the office because I want to spend more time to be with my baby in the morning. Then I finish late, but vice versa, you can also finish earlier. So yeah, and as long as you can deliver the expected results, I think that's fine. Yeah, so that's my thought.
So we talked a lot now about what corporations can do, but I mean, especially since we were talking about maternity leave specifically, I'm from the United States. So I don't know if anyone knows what the United States is like for women regarding maternity leave. I mean, if you're working for like some tech firm at like a high level like Facebook or Google, maybe it might not be this way. But for instance, my mom, when she had me, she was working for IBM at the time, she went back to work 10 days later. So yeah, my dad had like the day to go up to the hospital to see me be born, and then he went back to work the next day. So here in China, though, it's completely different, right? You have the 6 months that is like legally mandated, and so I think maybe He-Yuan, you can talk a little bit about like the other kind of extra corporational big systemic changes that would need to happen to help this move along.
Yeah, I think your example actually touches upon a very important idea that instead of asking women to constantly work harder, proving themselves that they deserve a promotion or deserve the dual credit that's owed to them. Maybe we can, shift the focus to men. And maybe we should ask men to take more care of the family and maybe make the working environment more family friendly. Because I think when we think of today's topic is equal pay, right? So we emphasize a lot about the payment. But don't forget that a lot of the work that women do are actually unpaid. I think it's extremely important that we revisit what is get paid and what is not in our everyday life. And I think that is where the real changes can happen, because I think currently at least GDP is still a very powerful kind of economic indicator, although in academics I think it has invited criticism since the 1990s. For example, the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen has written multiple books, and the theory of human development is actually a direct challenge against this GDP-oriented economic model to say that we need to really think about what's the meaning of development, right? So in the end, why do you want to constantly accumulate GDP growth? What's the point of accumulating those wealth?
Yeah.
In the end, you need to go back to look at people and serve the people. So we need to rethink our whole system and how it can become more people-oriented. Well, nowadays, I think the academic trend is to criticize the human-centric approach and to say we need to think about the world instead of in a more sustainable way, not just the people-centric, right? So I think these are very interesting conceptual framework that can help us to think about what has been done, what has been discussed, what has been not. Especially for women, I think many of the women took a lot of time to do unpaid jobs in the family, in their everyday life, in their workplace too. I think a lot of women, I was discussing with a colleague earlier, talking about the emotional labor that we put into dealing with very difficult male supervisors. I think that's, it's invisible, but it really takes you a lot of effort, right? So in family, the caring job, the emotional labor, the child rearing, the cooking and everything, those are not counted as GDPs, and they are not valued enough. And I think that is a very important angle that we can rethink about. And I think in terms of meritocracy, there are two kinds of meritocracy. One is a kind of strong meritocracy. It emphasizes that we need to pay back readjust the social injustices that has imposed upon certain groups. For example, women, for example, certain racial groups or certain countries, if they have been excluded from the mainstream for a long time. Therefore, when we think about what to hire, who to hire, you need to make adjustment to the historical injustice in society. But I think many companies, when they look at these things, they are not willing always to share that social burden of the social injustice. They are more taking a weak meritocratic approach where you look at performance-based. But even that, we can rethink about what is performance. Obviously, profit means performance, but the friendly working environment, right? The retention rate in a company, the creativity, the diverse culture, the changes you can happen. These are all important things in the longer term that can benefit a company. But I don't think these are valued enough when you, at least currently, when you hire a potential employee. I don't think those are valued enough in the criteria in choosing who we want to hire. So even on a weak meritocratic level, I think some of the current recruitment indicators are not actually as efficient as the HRs might want to think they are.
Well, thank you so much for that. My last question was actually about what individuals could do, just to take it back to what we can take away. But I figured since we're right about at 45 minutes, I wanted to open up to the floor and have you guys possibly ask our incredibly expert panel here any burning questions that you have on your mind. It does seem we are touching a lot on some of the things that our panelists have said about the unpaid labor not really being recognized as, valuable, when in fact, for instance, in France, you can see very much that it is valuable. It's holding people back, whether or not it is their personal choice or not. I mean, there's both mothers who want to be with their kids and mothers that don't. But we're not talking about fathers who want to be with their kids or fathers who don't. It's almost assumed that fathers don't for whatever reason, and I think that's hard to say. Hopefully not true. But also I think one of the points that you raised in terms of women not supporting women or men not supporting women goes back to Foucault's point about the 6 stages. And so Foucault, I guess one of my questions to you would be how do you get people from that stage of apathy to actually curiosity even? That seems so difficult to me.
Yeah, that's my voice is gone. But just to give a little bit of context, I've been with my the company that I'm at for the last 6 years, and I have been learning about this concept, and still learning about this idea, and I think getting buy-in from fellow male colleagues and picking the people who are going to be your allies has been really important to me, and I'm really grateful because my boss and the founder of the company is supportive, but there are people in the company who literally will tell me, why is this even important, right? And so I think something that I think we briefly touched on but didn't explicitly talk about was the idea of it needs to be tied to business outcomes within the company. But I think one discussion and question I want to put out here is also this idea of quotas, right? Or that's not the solution, and so how do you figure out? And so for me, it's what does this person care about the most, and framing this conversation to match what their motivations are, particularly men within the company. But it's so exhausting. And so it's why do the women have to be the ones responsible for this, right? And not even just women, but also, and this applies to race too, I think particularly in the US, it's exactly what's happening right now, where elderly women who are literally beat up on the streets are the ones that have to voice out their concern of getting beaten up. And so this is a question that I don't know the answer to, and something that I ask myself every day.
I think we have time for one more question. Wow, this hour really flew by. So does anyone else have a question that they would like to pose to our panel, or if our panel has just things that they want to say to end out, that's fine too. Yes. Wow. Yeah. So I guess, it's actually interesting. China has one of the highest workforce participations of women in the world. And it's also very special in terms of communist countries who have, China's not capitalist with Chinese characteristics, or communist with Chinese characteristics. But one of the few countries that has actually managed to keep this workforce participation up when transitioning into this more private economy. And so I wonder, but it's still also suffering from a lot of these issues where women are now, specifically because private enterprises have kind of become the way to go, suddenly getting these gender biases.
Even women, they have a kind of feeling I should take care of the family. And even though my work is not so successful, I can bear it. Because I can spend more time at the family. I'm not a total loser. But if the man is not successful, he will feel,
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Well, to sort of tie it all together, I think from an education standpoint, you're right, we need more education, but then these interview questions that women receive, especially in China, are absolutely terrible. They're antiquated and they're illegal in many countries. But then how do you educate women? How are we educating companies to ask questions and educating women to answer them? And especially when they've had a break in their workforce, when they've had this break where they're doing this unpaid labor. Perhaps they didn't go to school right away, perhaps they had children, perhaps they took a break for another reason. So what are companies like Hayes and other recruiting firms doing to bring the rest of us up to your level?
Yeah, what are
Loaded question.
doing?
And recruiting firms are a little bit hard because they got requests from the company.
I think we always educate our clients to say, try to break the internal rules or bias, and also to give confidence to female workers and trusting them. For example, when interviewing the female candidates, don't pose questions like, are you single? Are you going to have a kid? If there's childbearing intention, etc., don't ask, but only focus on the capacity as Grace mentioned. So that's what we try to influence our clients to do so. Yeah, but we can't monitor them or something like that. Yeah. So I think still, men and women, they are different, and we will always be different. But the true thing is that how we could consciously, unconsciously, and consistently to create a gender inclusive environment that we as a population will not miss out the true potential of ourselves. Yeah.
I think at the company level, more and more companies, especially those high-tech companies who are rich, right, and then they can offer, for example, parental leave. In China, it is about to have a parental leave policy. This will help a lot for the maternity leave. If your female want to take care of kids, their dad can also do that. Just having a support system to allow them to, share responsibility and do more work. On the second level, it's for company level. Like Nike, we do have a CEO in China who is female. And our leadership team has a large percentage of female because we highly emphasizing on the percentage of the female leadership. How do you develop the young leaders? How do you create a community of young female leaders? Not just female leader helping female leader, but also male leaders helping the female leader. Asking the male management to take responsibility and ask them to think about ways to engage the female leader to help to develop the group of conscious leaders to help cultivate the culture there. Maybe back to your point about education, I was just reflecting back on when I was growing up. My mom and dad, even my grandparents, never say, you need to dress up like a princess. So I was grew up like I do love science. I was constantly obsessed with transformers, mechanics. So just reflecting back on, I was not really trying to dress girlish, do the things that girls actually do. It shaped my confidence level. I don't need to buy how do I put it in English? Is every time I go into I never consider myself incompetent compared with men. I always have to believe I can do more. So with the education system, like the reason in China there's more emphasizing on because the scientist and STEM industry is more about male dominant doing program. How do you support the female from their younger kids cultivate an interest in that area rather than it's a predominant male related work career that might also help to solve the later on gender feel more conscious in gender equality along with
Yeah, so I think, well, once again, this ties into so many big issues, right? Because a part of it is like, say, entertainment, there's the outside world, and if the outside world is incredibly gendered, it can be very difficult as a mother to then be like, you don't have to pay attention to that, though. They might want to call themselves princesses, but, you can be something else. But and have your child believe you. But at the same time, I do think that and just to end this out, so that hopefully we can mingle a little bit. You can ask questions to our panel in a more private setting. But I do think that there is some hope here in China. I think especially in the last year, actually the entertainment scape in China, and I report on this, so I kind of know a little more about it, has been challenging very specific gender narratives here. I mean, you have had people talk about sexual harassment, and that's become like very big. You've had people challenge the whole stereotype of 剩女, you know, like leftover women, by having like very high profile older women be able to showcase that they're still worthwhile. They might, their kids might be grown up or something, but they still have value. And that sounds really sad that you have to tell people that, but like it is important that it's actually a story that's being told. And that is still speaking very much to tier 1 cities, but I do think that like things like entrepreneurship, digital entrepreneurship has helped a lot of rural women start their own businesses here, which has been actually a way for rural women in general to start to work their way out of these gender stereotype roles of being paid much less by, like, say, some private-owned enterprise boss when, they can sell baskets on Taobao or, fish on Taobao and live stream it and, like, make their own money that way. And so that's actually had a little bit of a balancing effect. though we will see in years if it was enough, to actually do anything here in China. But I think also one of the fun things about China that I found compared to the United States and other countries that I've seen is just like women and work here don't seem to be like at odds. Mm-hmm. And I think that is an important thing that we need to almost keep on emphasizing. Like women, they should be allowed to work. There's nothing there. Like there's not as much of a oh, you're a mother but you're at work. Like what's wrong with you? Kind of stereotype, at least here that I've seen here in Shanghai versus New York actually even. So I think modeling that like that openness towards ambition and so on and so forth is incredibly important, and then calling it out when you see people not doing it I think is very important too. Alright, so thank you so much for everybody for coming to this panel. I hope you got something from it. I'm going to try to lure these people to stay with maybe like buying them a drink or something like that, and then
We'll buy you a drink, Elaine.
Thank you so much for coming. And I think we can turn the music on so it doesn't seem like so cold in this room, but like thank you so much once again. And I do run the WeChat group called Women Helping Women, so if you're not in it already, please do let me know and I'll add you in. Once again, it's for people to ask for advice. There's people sometimes like being like, I have a wonderful IE in there, but then there's also people who are like, I need, resources for my company, where can I get them? And like I think the community has almost, without me touching it, been incredibly supportive and wonderful. So I really recommend joining it, not just